says Guyanese must not suffer due to political stalemate. DRC declares end to Ebola epidemic in the country's east. And Colombian soldiers being investigated for raping 12-year-old indigenous girl. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Bolo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is From the South. We begin with news that Caricom chair and Barbados Prime Minister Amor has expressed the bloc's dissatisfaction with the political crisis in Guyana following the March 2nd elections. She was speaking during an exclusive interview with Trinidad and Tobago's CNC3.
We sent in 2 observer teams. Our observer team was satisfied that the recount process was certified by the persons from the Guyana Election Commission and stood as a credible basis for the declaration of an electoral result. What is going on is a little bizarre, to say the least, but we shall wait and see and let the process play out over the next few days. But suffice it to say that there's a charter of civil society within Caribbean community that causes us to have to aspire to a very high level of behavior with respect to free and fair elections and with respect to giving full effect to the will of the people. I pray that we will recognize that there is no election that is worth the life of a single human being, that there is no election that is worth the damaging of the reputation, not only of one country, but our community.
Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister is seeking to allay citizens' fears that 39 cases of COVID-19 were recently imported into the country with the repatriation of nationals. He assures that the infected people do not pose a threat to the public.
That 39 new cases of imported COVID-19 have been detected and managed. I emphasize to you that none of these cases is a threat to the community at this time, and that through our identification, tracing, and quarantining process, the Ministry of Health is containing and treating affected persons. The 39 new cases are persons in which in excess of half are returning nationals who entered Antigua and Barbuda by air over the last few days. These nationals are now quarantined and isolated at the government facility at Hawksbill Hotel and will not be released into the community until they test negative. It is important that you know that none of these persons have been hospitalized. Presently, there is no one hospitalized in Antigua and Barbuda with COVID, and none of the new cases require hospitalization. The remaining individuals are in hotel properties which are equipped with facilities to isolate, monitor, and treat these individuals who tested positive for COVID.
Amid calls to remove sculptures which idolize colonizers and slave owners across the globe, social groups in Trinidad and Tobago reignited their long-standing request to have the government tear down the statue of Christopher Columbus in the capital. The mayor of Port of Spain withdrew himself from making the decision, calling it a national issue.
Is that the statue should be taken down and placed in the museum. It is our stance as a responsible corporation, and the fact that the capital city and the square where the statue is placed is not only utilized by citizens of Port of Spain, but by the wider population. The matter, therefore, has become a national issue. And as such, beyond the sole purview of the Port of Spain Corporation, therefore, as mayor, I withdraw from the matter as I await the input, advice, and policy decision from relevant arms of the national law.
Staying with Caribbean news, as of Wednesday, Cuba has reported 2,319 novel coronavirus cases, of which 2,130 people have recovered, while the death toll stands at 85. Our correspondent in Havana, Nayara Tardo, brings us details on how this sanctioned Caribbean island has managed to successfully fight the pandemic.
Estas imágenes
These images were taken on April 1st by a team of specialists of the Tropical Medicine Institute Pedro Curie. Martha became the 9th patient to recover from COVID-19 in Cuba. After nearly 2 months of overcoming the disease and respecting all the security measures, we went to hear the story of the grandmother that beat the virus, that is devastating the world.
¿Cómo se siente Marta a los 95 años después de haber vencido el coronavirus?
Bueno, me siento muy bien. A mí no me ha dejado secuelas.
I feel very well. I do not have any after effects. I feel a bit tired sometimes, but I feel well. I walk with a bit of help. I have a walker to move around the house.
Tengo un carrito para caminar.
Martha was one of the first COVID-19 cases in the island. Her daughter Clotilde, dancer and choreographer of the renowned dance company Acosta Danza, arrived from Spain the first days of March, yet she could not imagine what would come next. Clotilde was hospitalized together with her mother, but she affirms that seeing the favorable development of her mother made those days in the Health Institute easier.
Knowing what she slowly but surely overcome, how strong she was, that my mother did not have any serious problems, how well she was cared for. The most important thing for her is knowing two things, that Cuba is a special country, unique, and statistics proves it.
Martha could not avoid showing us her passion for football, for Barcelona and Messi.
Asegura que a estas alturas
She affirmed that at these stages of her life, beating COVID-19 has been her greatest goal.
Siempre he sido fanática de la mayoría de los deportes.
I have always been a fan of most sports, even wrestling and boxing. But when I started to watch football, luckily I started to watch it with Barcelona's match. That's when I became a fan of football and Messi.
As Cuba shows positive results in the control of the novel coronavirus, this family from Havana appreciates the work of the island's health system, while insisting that the best way to control the spread of the disease is individual and collective discipline.
I believe that the only thing that we can do is take care of ourselves. And thank God we are the best country to do it. We have all the necessary conditions, and my mother is an example of it. There is no way to repay what has been done. I lived firsthand. I lived in the hospital, I lived with the doctors, with the health staff, super committed, super loving and super attentive, and super professional, well prepared. It is amazing.
Today, Marta is part of the more than 2,100 recovered COVID-19 patients in Cuba. As she shows me the beautiful view from her balcony in Havana's neighborhood of Vedado, she confesses that watching the sea every afternoon makes her forget the intense days when she had to fight against COVID-19. Nayara Tardo, Telesur, La Habana.
Now, in some positive news, the Democratic Republic of Congo has officially declared an end to the Ebola epidemic that broke out in the east of the country in August 2018. Some 2,280 people died during the outbreak. No new cases of the disease have been reported in the northeast of the country since April 27th. The latest flare-up was the 10th to have hit the nation since 1976, when Ebola was first discovered. However, the nation is dealing with a fresh Ebola outbreak in the northwest of the country.
Compared to previous epidemics, this one was the longest, most complex and deadliest. 2,277 people have died. I'd like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of the government all my compassion and saddest condolence to all the families who have lost loved ones. 1,171 people have recovered thanks to innovations in the fight against the epidemic and in research on a vaccine and medication.
The World Health Organization has hailed the announcement as a victory for science.
The Ebola response was a victory for science. The rapid rollout of a highly effective vaccine saved lives and slowed the spread of Ebola. For the first time, the world now has a licensed Ebola vaccine.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. A group of Colombian soldiers are under investigation for the alleged rape of a 12-year-old indigenous girl. The victim, from the Imbera Chami tribe, disappeared from her community reserve in the north of the country on Sunday and was found a day later at a nearby school. She told indigenous authorities she had been sexually abused by at least 8 soldiers. The military and political leaders were quick to condemn the incident, and the Attorney General's office has launched a probe. It comes just 1 week after the Congress approved a constitutional reform that seeks to impose life imprisonment on people who sexually abuse or murder children under the age of 14.
25 interviews have been conducted with people who may have had knowledge of the occurrence of this sexual act, and the identification of the alleged perpetrators corresponding to 8 members of the National Army has also been achieved.
Continuing with Latin American news, the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, has announced more than 20 new COVID-19 infections in the country as she gave an update on the nation's coronavirus statistics.
In the last 24 hours, we are discovering 24 new cases of COVID-19 by a community infection across the Bolivarian nation of Venezuela. 131 cases came from Colombia, of migrants who were already infected over there. 3 from Ecuador and 7 from Peru. In total, we have 141 imported cases.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has said the upcoming legislative elections will help ease political and ideological differences within the country.
The new National Electoral Court is now active, and there will be a call for parliamentary elections. Venezuela has to resolve its political and ideological differences. We must reconcile differences through a single path, the electoral path, the path of democracy, the path of democratic debate.
The president has also said if there ever was a referendum to revoke his government, it would have to be a democratic decision made only by the people.
In Venezuela, those who decide, those who elect, and those who revoke are the sovereign people of Venezuela, through their vote. No one else, not Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, not a group of co-plotted.
Moving on, Peruvian President Martin Vizcarra has announced that if the government and private clinics do not reach an agreement for the use of intensive care units, he will activate a constitutional law that allows governmental intervention on private property.
We are going to wait 48 hours for both sides to reach an agreement, and we hope this will be possible. If not, considering health and human life and taking into account the first article of the Constitution, we will apply Article number 70 of our Constitution.
Turning our attention to Africa, 500,000 Senegalese school children have returned to class under instructions to wear face masks and keep a distance from each other after 3 months of absence. The government in the West African state shut schools in mid-March in a bid to curb coronavirus infections. Thursday's reopening affects 551,000 children out of some 3.5 million in Senegal, with only pupils who are sitting exams this year returning to class. Other antivirus measures such as shutting universities, closing the land and air borders, and imposing a nighttime curfew remain in place.
I'm glad to be back in class because it's been a fair while since we've had classes, and that's not good for a school year. We've gone almost 3 months without coming to school, and that's very tricky for us final year students.
We are not stressed because we've been studying at home, and really we've had 4 months or 3.5 months of rest, but also of getting prepared, working and studying. And yes, we have just started classes again. We are very happy to be back in class.
Police in the Democratic Republic of Congo have fired tear gas and water cannons to repel hundreds of protesters who rallied against a proposed new law on Wednesday. Opponents say the reform, which would place prosecutors under the government's authority rather than the courts, undermines the independence of the judiciary branch. On the second day of protests, crowds faced off with security forces on the streets around Parliament before being pushed back by armed officers in jeeps. Shifting gears now, South Africa plans to roll out the continent's first coronavirus vaccine trial this week. The vaccine candidate, developed by the Oxford Jenner Institute in the United Kingdom, is already being evaluated there, where 4,000 participants have signed up for the trial. In South Africa, the University of Witwatersrand is collaborating with the University of Oxford and the Oxford Jenner Institute in the trial of the vaccine known as ChAdOx1 nCoV-19. The pilot will involve 2,000 people, including 50 who have HIV.
These 8 participants form part of what is known as Group 1, which is a group where it's a small group of 50 individuals where we're trying to understand 2 important issues. The first issue is the safety of the vaccine, especially in terms of what would be common side effects, and the second issue is how well the body mounts an immune response against the vaccine. Once there's about 60% of the population that have developed immunity, we expect that effective reproductive rate to drop to under 1. It doesn't mean the virus is going to go away. But once there's 60% of the population, especially the adult population, that becomes immune, we expect that effective reproductive rate to go to under 1, which basically means the virus will still be around, it will still circulate, but its chain of transmission has been interrupted, which is important.
We have more stories coming up from the Middle East and Europe, so stay with us. Welcome back. A protest leader in southern Tunisia has been released 4 days after his arrest amid angry protests over unemployment in the region. Tariq Haddad is the spokesman for a growing popular mobilization underway in Tatooine, a town where protesters are demanding authorities make good on a 2017 promise to provide jobs. He had been arrested overnight on Saturday and charged with participating in a gathering likely to disturb the peace.
Tatooine has just one motto: Tatooine will never give up. We'll protect our country. Some people want to install chaos in the country. They've used huge amounts of tear gas, but we want to tell them that this country is both ours and yours. It's everyone's country, so stop the oppression.
Iran has announced 134 new deaths from the novel coronavirus, taking the overall death toll in the country past 10,000.
We lost 134 of our compatriots in the past 24 hours, and the total number of victims is 10,130. We call on all our compatriots to follow the health protocols, especially the elderly and those with underlying diseases. We also urge children and young people not to be present in crowded centers, to keep their distance from the elderly, grandparents, and to help them to stay at home as much as possible.
In some other news, during a virtual meeting of the UN Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres repeated a call to Israel to stop its plans to annex the occupied West Bank. Guterres called Israel's upcoming decision a watershed moment that will constitute a most serious violation of international law. Guterres' call was echoed by other leaders and foreign ministers addressing, warning that Israel's unilateral action could trigger a major escalation of violence in the region. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Malki warned any annexation would be a crime and lead to immediate and tangible repercussions.
Annexation, whether partial or total, gradual or immediate, is the ultimate breach of the UN Charter and cannot go unchallenged. From a legal perspective, annexation is not only unlawful, it is a crime under the Rome Statute. From a political perspective, it will ruin the chances for Israeli, Palestinian, and regional peace. From a security perspective, it is utter nonsense, as it replaces internationally recognized borders that can be defended with a system of military control and subjugation that only fuels conflict and violence.
In Southeast Asia, nearly 100 Rohingya from Myanmar, including 30 children, have been rescued from a wooden boat off the coast of Indonesia's Sumatra island. Images shot from Indonesian rescue boats showed dozens of children and adults, many weeping, after they had been plucked from their vessel by local fishermen. Many of them had gone without food for several days. Malaysia and Indonesia are favored destinations for Rohingya fleeing violence in Myanmar, with thousands trying a perilous escape via smugglers across the sea every year.
Initially, our local fishermen found the refugees' boat, which almost sank. Then, we dispatched an evacuation team to rescue them. We understand so far that they consist of 15 men, 49 women, and 30 children. The minors comprise 10 boys and 20 girls.
Now to Europe, German chemical giant Bayer has agreed to pay more than $10 billion to settle tens of thousands of claims after reports that its popular weed killer Roundup could cause cancer. The main ingredient of Roundup is glyphosate, which according to a 2015 WHO study could probably cause cancer. The amount includes $1.25 billion set aside to deal with potential claims from people who have used Roundup in the past and may develop the form of cancer known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the years to come. Bayer inherited the legal morass when it bought Roundup's manufacturer Monsanto for $63 billion in June 2018. The settlement covers an estimated 95,000 cases, but Bayer still faces at least 25,000 claims from plaintiffs who have not agreed to be part of the agreement. Kosovo's President Hashim Thaçi has been indicted on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in the country's 1990 conflict. The prosecutor said that Thaçi and 9 others are criminally responsible for nearly 100 murders, torture, and forced disappearances. The accusations covering Kosovo's independence war against Serbia in 1998 to 1999 have to be confirmed by a judge at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers before formal charges are announced. The war cost more than 10,000 lives and only ended after a NATO air campaign. Kosovo declared its independence in 2008, something Serbia still does not recognize. Staying in the region, 28 African refugees who were rescued at sea have tested positive for the novel coronavirus in Italy. The test results represent the largest cluster yet among newly arrived migrants after a handful of positive cases were recorded in recent days in Greece. The migrants were being held on the ship Moby Zaza off the coast of Sicily, where some would-be asylum seekers are taken to undergo quarantine after being rescued at sea.
I'm personally worried about this situation. We should think about this community that woke up with this news. Unfortunately, we have workers and authorities and a good prefect who are working to handle in every place and every aspect a situation in which you have 28 people COVID positive on this ship. I'd like to clarify, as far as tourism is concerned, that Sicily continues to be COVID-free. This is news because, fortunately, these people are located on a ship in quarantine.
In France, the Louvre Museum in Paris, home to the Mona Lisa, is set to reopen on July 6th after being shut down due to the pandemic for nearly 4 months. France is to further ease restrictions imposed to combat the virus from Tuesday, but it will only be in July that many top museums and attractions reopen. Culture Minister Franck Riester confirmed Friday that wearing a mask would be mandatory for visiting a museum in France, while some would have to impose prior reservation systems to avoid a heavy influx of visitors.
We have 75% of the foreign visitors. Indeed, after the French, the most important visitors are the United States and China, followed by Brazilians and Koreans. So if the borders remain closed, these visitors are not there. So we are expecting a drop in attendance of about 80%. Of course, this has financial consequences. Today we can roughly measure the losses since the closure at a little over 40 million euros. It is difficult to know if it will get worse in the coming months, probably.
3 people have died and hundreds have fled their homes in the western part of Ukraine following the worst flooding in a decade. Floods caused by heavy rains that began this week hit 200 villages, damaging 5,000 homes and forcing the evacuation of 800 people. The Interior Ministry said around 70% of monthly rainfall in some regions fell over several days. Some experts blame large-scale and often illegal logging operations in the Carpathian Mountains for removing trees that would normally help contain the runoff. And finally, I must inform you that Telesur English is reaching more areas across the Caribbean. You can find us on the following channel and settings. With that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For all viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I am Doris Polo. Thanks for watching.